All right, so today we're going to be diving into the total classic, we're talking The Goal by Eliyahu M. Goldratt.
Oh, this one's a big one.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people hear business book and they think like boring lectures and spreadsheets, right? But this is different.
Oh, absolutely. This is a page turner.
Seriously, it's a novel, it's a story, and Goldratt uses it to unpack some seriously powerful ideas about productivity.
And he does it in a way that just sucks you right in.
For sure. We meet Alex Rogo, our main man, who's the plant manager at this factory that's, well, let's just say it's not doing so hot.
Yeah, they're on the brink.
Totally. And I love how Goldratt drops us right there on the factory floor with Alex. Like you can practically hear those machines humming, smell the like oil and metal in the air.
It's all clanging, and those orange sodium lights really sets the scene.
Exactly. And you feel that tension, that weight on Alex's shoulders.
Wow.
He's got 3 months to turn things around, or corporate's shutting the whole place down.
And it's not just a business on the line, right?
Oh, heck no. This is Alex's hometown we're talking about.
His whole life,
That's
basically.
why, like, Goldratt doesn't let us forget the stakes here. The boarded up shops downtown, the worry in his wife's voice, even the tension at his kid's soccer game. This is about livelihoods, families, a whole community hanging in the balance.
It gets real fast.
Right. And then, boom, enter Jonah.
Ah, the mysterious mentor figure.
Right. Alex bumps into him at the airport, of all places, after this brutal encounter with his boss. And it's like this chance meeting sparks this whole chain of events.
It's like fate or something, right?
Totally. And Jonah, he's not your typical, rah-rah, here's the secret to success kind of mentor.
He's more like a Socratic guide.
Yes. He bombards Alex with these thought-provoking questions that really make him examine his assumptions about, well, everything.
Especially about what it means to be productive.
Exactly. At first, Alex is all about efficiency, right? Like, just make more stuff faster and everything will be fine.
Seems logical, but
But it's not the whole picture.
not even close. Jonah, he's like, hold on a minute. He starts poking holes in Alex's logic with these deceptively simple questions like, what's the real goal of your factory?
And this is where things get really interesting.
This is the aha moment, right?
Right. What is the goal? It's not just about making things. It's not even about being efficient necessarily. It's about making money.
Sounds obvious when you say it like that.
I know, right? But it's amazing how often we lose sight of that basic principle.
We get caught up in the weeds.
Exactly. We're so busy chasing metrics and hitting targets that we forget what we're actually trying to achieve.
We forget about the why,
Exactly. So, okay, making money, that's the goal.
the ultimate goal.
But how do we actually, do that?
Right, because it's not just about, working harder or churning out more widgets.
It's got to be more than that, right?
Exactly. Jonah, he introduces these 3 key measurements that change everything.
Okay, hit me.
Throughput, inventory, and operational expense.
Okay, those sound kind of familiar.
Yeah, you probably heard them before, but Jonah, he gives them this whole new meaning, this way of looking at them that just clicks,
Okay, so break it down for me.
All right, so throughput. We got to start thinking of it like as the rate at which the system generates money through sales.
Not productive.
Not just production, sales. That's the key.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much you make if it just sits there in a warehouse.
Ah, okay, so it's about what's actually moving, what's bringing in the cash.
Exactly. Now, inventory, that's a tricky one.
How so?
Well, it's easy to see a ton of inventory and think, oh, things are going great.
Makes sense. Stuff piling up means you're productive, right?
Okay. But Jonah, he flips the script on that. He says, look, inventory is all the money the system has tied up in things it intends to sell.
Okay.
It's all those raw materials, the work in progress, the finished goods just sitting there, money frozen in time.
I never thought about it like that.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot, enough to meet demand, but not so much that it becomes a liability.
Okay, so what about the last one? Operational expense.
Ah, that's where we get into the nitty-gritty of costs. Everything that goes into turning inventory into throughput. Labor costs, utilities, machine maintenance, you name it.
So it's basically the fuel that keeps the whole thing running.
Exactly.
Okay, so to make money, you need to maximize throughput, keep inventory lean, and minimize operational costs.
You got it.
Sounds simple enough in theory, but I bet it gets complicated real fast when you're dealing with a real-life factory.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting. See, factories, businesses, even our own lives, they're all systems. And within these systems, there are always bottlenecks, constraints, these things that hold everything back.
I've definitely hit my fair share of bottlenecks.
And to illustrate this, Goldratt uses this really memorable analogy, Alex's Boy Scout hike.
Oh, yeah, the one where everything goes wrong.
Exactly. Remember Herbie, the kid with the heavy backpack, slugging along, setting the pace for the entire troop.
Ah, Herbie. We all know a Herbie.
Right. And in this case, Herbie is the bottleneck.
Yeah.
He dictates how fast the whole group can move, no matter how fast the other kids are.
Even if you've got a bunch of track stars in the group.
It doesn't matter. The slowest element sets the pace.
So it's not enough to just identify the Herbies in the system.
Exactly. And that's where those concepts of statistical fluctuations and dependent events come into play.
Okay, this sounds kind of complex.
They are, but stick with me. So statistical fluctuations, that just means things don't always happen at a predictable rate, right? Some days are more productive than others, some parts take longer to make, that kind of thing.
Got it.
But then we have these dependent events, where one thing can't happen until another thing is finished.
Like a relay race.
Exactly. So even if you have some parts flying through the system, it doesn't matter if they get stuck waiting on Herbie to finish his part.
Right, it creates a domino effect.
Precisely. And suddenly, that one seemingly insignificant bottleneck can bring the whole system to a grinding halt.
Okay, so I get it. But how do you actually find the Herbies in a complex system like a factory?
That's what Alex and his team have to figure out.
And where do they even begin?
Well, naturally, they suspect their most expensive machine is the culprit, the NCX-10.
Makes sense. Big fancy machine, gotta be the workhorse, right?
Right. But what they uncover is that while the NCX-10 might be super efficient on paper, its limited capacity actually creates a backlog, a bottleneck.
Oh, wow. So the very thing they thought was their biggest asset was actually holding them back.
Exactly. And that's such a crucial lesson. Sometimes our assumptions about what we think is the problem blind us to the real issue.
So what happens next? Do they just ditch the NCX-10 and buy a new one?
Well, it's tempting to think that throwing money at the problem will solve it, right?
Sure.
But Jonah, he teaches them about this concept of exploiting the constraint.
What it basically means?
It means figuring out how to squeeze every last bit of potential out of that bottleneck.
Okay, so how do they do that?
Well, they come up with this really simple but clever system. They start putting red tags on all the parts that are destined for the NCX-10.
Red tags.
Yeah, like a big visual cue.
Uh-huh.
So anyone on the factory floor, they see that red tag, they know, okay, this part takes priority. No more getting lost in the shuffle. These babies go straight to the front of the line.
So simple, but I bet it made a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And they didn't stop there. They also rearranged the workers' lunch breaks, so the NCX-10 was never just sitting there idle.
Smart. Every minute counts when you're talking about your bottleneck.
Exactly. And you know what? These almost common sense solutions, they led to some pretty impressive results.
Like what?
Well, for starters, their lead times went down.
Meaning?
It took them less time to get orders out the door.
Okay, that's huge.
Right. And because they were so focused on keeping that NCX-10 humming, the whole workflow just got smoother, more efficient.
And I bet that also had a positive impact on quality, didn't it?
You nailed it. When you eliminate bottlenecks, you reduce the chance of errors, of things getting rushed or overlooked. Yeah. Quality tends to go up naturally.
Wow. So it's amazing how these things are all connected.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this whole systems thinking approach so powerful.
Okay, so let's say they've optimized the heck out of the NCX-10, right? Are they done?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this whole concept of constraints. It's not a one-and-done kind of thing.
What do you mean?
As soon as you solve one bottleneck, another one pops up. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, but instead of moles, it's constraints, limitations. They're always there, lurking.
So it's an ongoing process.
Exactly. It's about continuous improvement, always looking for ways to identify and manage those constraints. Because the reality is, things change, markets shift, new technologies emerge. You're never really done.
It makes you realize that the goal is so much more than just a business book, you know?
I totally agree. It's a philosophy, really. A framework for approaching any complex system, whether you're running a factory, managing a team, or even just trying to get a handle on your own life.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the goal, what's like the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
Honestly, I think it's this.
Yeah.
Find your Herbies. Identify those bottlenecks, those constraints, those tasks, those habits, those mindsets that are holding you back, both in your work and in your personal life.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and not step back and look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. But once you identify those constraints, don't shy away from them, don't try to work around them. embrace them, figure out how to exploit them, how to turn those limitations into opportunities for growth.
Because often, those obstacles are actually our biggest opportunities in disguise. I love that. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. This book always gets me fired up.